You're clean, aren't you? Except for your tower. You're a tower junkie, Roland.
Hello and welcome to Tower Junkies, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. Tower Junkies is a podcast celebrating the work of Stephen King with an occasional focus on his magnum opus, The Dark Tower series. We discuss the themes, characters, and mythology of the series in Palaver episodes, and review the books and comic series in Kef episodes. We also discuss non-Tower King novels, TV and film adaptations of King's work, and the latest news about all things that serve the King. You can find more of our work at TowerJunkiesPod.com, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, and follow us on every level of social media at Tower Junkies Pod. I'm one of your hosts, Matt Hurt, and with me today, as usual, over Google Hangouts because of COVID-19, is Tiny. Hi, Tiny.
What's up, buddy?
Not much. How's it going?
It's going good, man.
Good. Are you excited to continue our review series about King's massive post-apocalyptic horror novel, The Stand?
Never heard of it.
Oh, well, this is great. This is
yeah, looking forward to it.
Okay, cool. Good. Yeah, me too. It's been a long time coming. We finished, so we're continuing our series, reviewing The Stand in 3 pieces, the novel, in the lead up to the Stand miniseries on CBS All Access. So we're recording these kind of in a vacuum. We're recording these in the past. It'll be a couple months before you guys actually hear this. So today it is June 9th, 2020. And yeah, Tiny, how's it been since our last recording of The Stand?
Not too bad.
Good.
Still getting through all this virus stuff.
Yep.
And now there's people rioting in the streets.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
2020 is just nuts, man.
It is. Rioting and protesting and being tear gassed. It's crazy. It's crazy times. But yeah, we talked a little bit about that in a Patreon stuff in the past that I think will be posted. But yeah, it's crazy times. Yep. How do you feel about COVID though? Like right now with everything, for context, we're recording this after our local government at least has started opening stuff up, perhaps prematurely. And that, coupled with the protests going on for Black Lives Matter in response to the George Floyd killing, how do you feel about where we are in terms of opening the economy and going out and doing shit?
I think it's really time for people to start getting back out there, despite the fact that I agree with you that it might be too soon.
Yeah.
Or I just feel like people are just going nuts. And like, I think we all know what the risks are now, and I think everybody should be able to take their own risks. So, like,
interesting.
I understand that by going out, if I go out, I could possibly infect other people. Mm-hmm. Even if I'm asymptomatic and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I understand that's a selfish thing. Like I totally agree with that. But I feel like at this point, if you're like more at risk or whatever, like you have to make the decision to stay home as opposed to everybody else has to stay home. Like I feel like you have to mitigate your own risk. Like you have to take your own risks, and like I don't know if I'm really doing it justice, but like I feel like you can't just keep people home forever, and like how long are we going to do this? I don't know. I think you got to let people start going out there, and measures need to be in place. People need to stay away from each other in public. Yeah. If you go into a restaurant, you need to have some empty tables between you. Like there's obviously that stuff needs to happen. People should be wearing masks. Like that's obvious stuff, right? But
that's like when you go out, do you wear masks?
I do. So like my job, I'm required to. And like if someone sees us without one and they like report us, like I could get suspended and stuff like that. So I take it seriously, and I actually wear mine like all the time. And so I've kind of gotten used to it. And like I have like a reusable one that I use at work, and like I have a ton of the disposable ones now.
Yeah.
And so because I have them available to me, like I do wear them a lot, even when I'm not at work. And I went to CVS today after work, and I just went ahead and in there just because I think it puts other people at ease. And yeah, so I do. Yeah, I wear it.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah, and that's an interesting perspective to have as far as like mitigating risks and stuff. And like I'm of the thought that like, okay, yes, we can, the idea that we should expect people to be able to make their own choices and stuff, like I get that, but also I kind of think everyone's a fucking idiot.
It's true.
So like, I don't know, like when I see like videos, it hasn't happened recently because of all the protests and everything, but like videos of just douchebags like at like the grocery store or something, like complaining about having to wear masks. Like, okay, well, if it's a fucking policy of the business that you're in to wear a mask and you're not going to wear a mask, you're not going to patronize that business. Like that's plain and simple. Like that's the policy that they're putting forth. Yeah. You're not fucking entitled to whatever. Like I saw one that just pissed me off so much. It was like a dude at Costco was had a full shopping cart, and like the Costco employee was like, you need to wear a mask, and then he's like, I thought I woke up in a free country. And it's like, fuck you, man. Like,
God,
it's not like, God damn it. And like every time, like I saw the video a couple times, and I was like the Costco employee was super like really amiable, and he was like, you know, it's our policy, you have to wear a mask, and if not, you're not gonna buy anything here. That's plain and simple. And like he took the cart and put it away, and the guy like left. But it's like, just get off your fucking high horse. Like it's not a big, like, fucking wear a mask for the 15 minutes you're gonna get the garbage that you're gonna shovel into your mouth, and then go home and don't wear a mask. Like that, it's fucking simple. But like the thing that I kept thinking was like, I really hope that after this video surfaces, and I hope that after this video has went viral, I hope that Costco also implements a no sunglasses in the store thing, because the guy was wearing sunglasses and looked like just such a fucking tool. Yeah, God.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like the freedom you have to go home and not wear a mask is the same freedom that Costco has to not allow you into their business without one.
Yep.
Like it's the same principle. It's the same amount of freedom that you each have.
Yep.
And just like you can keep people from coming into your home if they're doing something you don't like, Costco can keep you from coming into their business because you're doing something they don't like.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what freedom is.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. Anyway, we're here to talk about
one of the big businesses has been Menards, because Menards is like the only hardware store that's requiring masks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and like I've been to Lowe's and Home Depot a lot since this whole COVID thing, but I've only been to Menards like once or twice.
Okay.
But they have like a sign out front. It's like you have to wear a mask cover, and they have like a security guard at the entrance. And if you don't have one, they will sell you one. That's the other thing that people are pissed off about. They'll sell you one for like 70 cents. Like,
capitalism.
Yeah, people are just pissed off. Like, well, why you won't give it to me for free? You're requiring it. Why do I have to buy it?
Oh, Jesus, it's 70 cents though.
Yeah, go to fucking Lowe's.
Yeah, Jesus. Yeah. So that's crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. And I have broken quarantine quite a bit. Which, you know, I wear masks and stuff. So, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. But anyway, that's the past. We're in the future now, where we're talking about The Stand.
Yep.
So I wanted to mention, before we get into it, this episode we're going to be talking about the book 2 of The Stand, the complete and uncut edition of the novel. Book 2, On the Border, which is from July 5th to September 6th. I don't have the page numbers readily available, but you can check your table of contents and everything. So, like we did last time, we're going to try not to spoil anything in book 3. So we're going to do books 1 and 2. Spoilers are on for books 1 and 2. And before we get into that, I do have a few news items to go through, which is interesting because we're recording this a while in advance, so the news is not going to be like recent, but I do want to just mention a few things. One is that on May 20th, there was an exclusive behind-the-scenes article about Stephen King's The Stand, CBS All Access miniseries, in Vanity Fair on May 20th by renowned Stephen King writer Anthony Breznican, actually, who I've mentioned before on the podcast. So yeah, did you read the article or check out the pictures of the from the miniseries?
Yeah, I definitely did. I'm cautiously optimistic about the series because I feel like the series from the 90s was meh. Yeah. Just very meh. And I think this is a difficult story to adapt. Mm-hmm. But I do have faith in the people involved, and I like a lot of the casting choices. Mm-hmm. I'm also kind of hit or miss on CBS All Access. They're not proven in my book by any means. Reference our other episodes of the podcast where we talked about shows that are on CBS, CBS All Access. So yeah, there's some things to be excited about and be worried about, but I did enjoy the article. I like that the set photos were cool. Mm-hmm. Definitely cool. And yeah, there's a lot of enthusiasm for it. So
yeah, I'm really looking forward to it too. I'll put a link in the show notes, of course, for that article. But one thing that stood out to me in the article was that the structure that they're going to have for the adaptation is an interesting take. It's not going to start, from what I understand, it's not going to start with the outbreak. It's going to start with, them in Boulder and everything. And then I guess they are going to employ flashbacks a la Lost, presumably, to kind of flesh out the stories of the characters and everything and the backstory. So I'm pretty interested in that approach. I've got to say, I kind of wish we could. I hope that in some capacity we do get the big outbreak scene in the series. I don't know how that would be with that format, but I don't know. I just think it would be cool to see.
Yeah, that format was encouraging. I think that's a cool idea.
Yeah, and the set photos look amazing. Just seeing Alexander Skarsgård outside of the jail cell where. I confuse his name with Harold Lauder.
Lloyd Henreid.
Lloyd Henreid, yes. I think I may have initial dyslexia because I get them confused. Lloyd Henreid and Harold Lauder. Anyway, and there's one picture of Harold Lauder and Franny that looks really bizarre. They're just sitting on a couch, but it looks like the wardrobe looks really retro, and I don't know, Harold Lauder looks just really disturbing in it. So yeah. And the other thing was, one of the pictures was one of Harold's messages on the wall. Pretty interesting that I think that it's going to take place, or at least that part of the story where he's leaving signs behind, is going to take place in September, in the fall, whereas in the book it was in the summer. So I wonder how the time frame is going to work out for this adaptation. So yeah,
we'll see.
Yep. Next piece of news I have is just a couple of shout outs. I can't remember if last time I mentioned these podcasts, but there's a couple other stand podcasts to kind of mention. One is The Circle Opens, which I've referenced on the podcast before. Really good chapter by chapter analysis of The Stand. It's a one woman show. She's going chapter by chapter. Really cool. I'm someone I host a solo podcast myself, so I know how difficult and also how engaging and awesome it is. So, and it was funny because I listened to the first chapter of it, the first episode, and the host, she at the end of it, she was like, "Oh, I hope that this was okay. This was my first time ever doing a podcast," and I was like, this holy shit!" It was perfect. It was perfect.
Damn. Yeah, some people just have a knack for that stuff.
Oh, I know, and it took us it's taken us like 7 years to fake it. But I was very impressed with it. So check that out. It's The Circle Opens. She also has a blog as well. I think it's thecircleopens.com, but I'll put a link in the show notes to be sure. And then the other thing I want to bring up is, Tiny, did you listen to the Company of the Mad, The Stand podcast?
I have not listened to that yet.
Okay, so we referenced it on another episode way back when we, like, in the now. But it's a new podcast from Jason Seacrest, who is a writer, and he has a Patreon, patreon.com/Jason Seacrest. I'll put a link in the show notes. His name is spelled a little differently. Sechrest. So, he started a new podcast, the Company of the Mad, The Stand podcast. It's him with a panel of people who are of very much of note. Let me bring that up here. Go to thestandpodcast.com. Okay, so I listened to the first episode. It's Jason Seacrest, it's Mike Flanagan, it's Anthony Bresnikan, it's Tananarive Dew, and they are just going through the Stand 200 pages at a time. Really loved that first episode. At the time of this recording, there's only been one episode. And man, it's so good. I'm really impressed with it. Just to brag a little bit, but Jason Seacrest, he tweeted out like how he started the podcast and everything. And like he mentioned that he listened to hours and hours of Stephen King podcasts and listed a bunch of them, and we were included. And I was like, holy shit, people listen to this. That's awesome.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So I was very pleased with that. And also just quick shout out as well is that Tananarive Dew, she's got a lot of credentials under her belt and everything, but here in a couple of weeks as of this recording, her first TV episode is going to air on CBS All Access. It is an episode of The Twilight Zone, and I'll be covering it on Anthology. I'm really excited because her episode is, I think she wrote it with her husband, and it is, I believe it's called A Small Town, and it features Damon Wayans Jr., which I'm really excited about because I like him as an actor.
Nice.
Yeah, so check that out on anthologypod.com. And check out that podcast, the standpodcast.com and The Circle Opens. Both great Stand podcasts, and yeah, so excited about that. Whew. So, Tiny.
Yes, sir.
Have we gotten all of our new business out of the way, and should we go on to our review of Book 2 of The Stand, On the Border, July...
Let's freaking do it.
Okay. So, all right. So just to be warned, we are going to be spoiling Book 2 of The Stand. That is the middle section of the book, obviously, of 3 books. And we will also be touching on Book 1 as well, which we covered last time on the podcast. So, without further ado, let's go into our thoughts on Book 2 of The Stand, On the Border, July 5th to September 6th. We are reading from the complete and uncut edition of the novel. So, Tiny, overall thoughts on the Border. Like, how did you feel going into this section of the book, and how did you feel coming out of it in kind of broad terms? And then we can kind of dig into the meat of it after we go through our broad terms.
Going into it, I sort of remember this section of the book being kind of my favorite. Like, okay, this part with like the first, however, 10 chapters of the third part. Mm-hmm. We've talked ad nauseum about endings and Stephen King's relationship to endings as a writer. Mm-hmm. And I think this book is one of those where the ending is, I don't want to say it's forgettable, but it's not the most memorable part of the book.
The ending of book 2 or of the book?
The ending of The Stand in general. The whole ending. Like, I don't latch onto that part of this story. Yeah. Right. And so I think, to me, the funnest part is the gelling of the characters, of our main quartet, if you will, of characters in the Boulder Free Zone is just the best part. Like, that's some of my my favorite parts of this story are in book 2.
Nice.
So I remember looking forward to this part of the book the few times I've reread it. And it having read it, it's sort of re-solidified that for me. Like I think this is my favorite part of the entire book. The entire book is book 2. Because I just love the way everything comes together and starts to gel. The characters, the setup of the conflict, the beginnings of the conflict, and the sides are set, and I don't know. I really enjoy this part.
Nice. It's interesting because on paper I shouldn't really enjoy this part of the book as much as I probably would otherwise. It's a really, I don't want to say slow moving, because there are so many moving pieces in this just vast story. And what's interesting is that book 2 is almost completely 100% Boulder Free Zone characters. Like, we get very, very little Randall Flagg. We get very little Las Vegas. We get very little like crucifixions and stuff. Like we've got just bare minimum of that. And I think that's a really interesting way to slowly build up to the third act of the story, because we get these characters that are just interacting with each other. They're getting to know each other. They're bonding. They're learning how to rebuild society. And it's something that like the specter of Flagg is ever present throughout the entire section of the book, but he's very rarely like called attention to or even seen in terms of the reader. Like, I think we get like one or two like sections where we actually are with Flagg, and from what I remember, and it's something that I think is really powerful in the storytelling, because we get these characters that are bonding and are creating a society, while all the while knowing that they're meant for bigger purposes, and that there's stuff on the horizon that's going to come. And I think that that's a really interesting balance to strike. And I really think that it's, I don't want to say ballsy of King, but I think it's really, I don't even know if I want to say it's unique of King, but it's like, it's very King to have massive passages throughout this section that is just committee meetings, like
right.
Transcribed minutes from the Boulder Free Zone committee meetings and everything. Like, it should be like grueling to get through, but it is so like enthralling in its own way, because we're part of the majesty of that is that we've just gone through a whole section, a whole third of a novel about the complete breakdown of society and the death of like 90 some odd % of the human population. And now we're here in this intimate setting with all of these characters that are working toward like keeping the lights on. They're working toward creating a community. And like, that is something that sticks with me whenever I think of The Stand itself. So, yeah.
I agree. It's such a fun shift from the first book.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
And but we do get plenty of conflict and plenty of tension and everything. Like, even though Flagg isn't really present that much, we do get, like I said, the specter of Flagg that's kind of hanging over it in terms of like Harold's kind of seduction toward the dark side, and Nadine's like pleas to try to get out of his shadow and everything like that. Like, those kind of those two characters in particular are really fascinating in their development in this book, because they're trying to break free of what could be construed as their destiny, but also like they have free will and they could choose this, but they choose maybe a wrong path or two. So it's a really fascinating kind of character play.
Absolutely. And it's what's so compelling about, I think, Nadine and well, especially Nadine, but also Harold, is that it's really tragic what happens to them. Like, it's not, it's not like they're evil people. Like, they don't have those urges within them, but they're sort of victims of circumstance, especially Nadine. Like, I feel like she, like you said, you use the word plea, which is perfect, because she can see a path to staying in Boulder and not becoming subject to the wills of the Man in Black and Randall Flagg. And it's a very simple path, but it's completely dependent upon other people.
Right.
And, and it's so tragic how she pleads and begs,
Larry,
thank you, to take her in and sort of kind of give in to the way he felt for so long.
Yeah.
And he just has, he's kind of moved on from that, and it's really kind of tragic. And Harold is just kind of does it to himself in a way. Like I think he's been accepted for who he is, and I think they put a lot of limitations on him, and he has these sort of delusions of grandeur. Like he's clearly remarkably brilliant, but he's so held back by his social mannerisms, and frankly the way he acted and treated people, like in the beginning of the crisis. Like he's suffering the ramifications of that, and he doesn't know how to handle it, and it just results in him taking the darkest timeline and going down the darkest path,
Exactly.
And that's tragic in and of itself, despite how emphatically he gives in to the dark side, if you will. How hardcore he goes Darth Vader,
right.
It's despite that, it's still tragic.
Yeah, Harold is kind of a victim of his own hubris. Like he feels like he's destined for great things, but because of that, he's also feels like he should be subjugating everyone he knows. Like he should be above everyone else. Like his station is above everyone else because he knows more, because he's better read than most people his age and everything. And it's really incongruous to the society that they're building. And one of the things I love about his character growth in this section of the book, even though it does kind of seal his fate, and make him irredeemable, is that he has that pull. He has that desire. There are moments where he is like talking to Stu, and Stu invites him over for dinner with Franny, and Harold's inner monologue with at that moment is just of confusion. Like he's not sure. Like it's kind of a temptation thing that's like, well, maybe I can be pretty good, or maybe I don't need to be a pedantic brat and just a childlike person. But it just leads to a tragic conclusion in this section of the book, though.
Yeah, and what drives it home even more for Harold, in my opinion, is the fact that I think for me in the first act, the first book, I related to him kind of a lot, not because
interesting
I fit that bill, but because of his infatuation with Franny. Like that drives so much of his attitude, and the way he acts towards people is based on that, right?
Yeah.
And the way that falls apart once more people are introduced to the picture. It's once the social aspect increases, he starts to lose ground. And the way the reason I relate to it is because I think, as a 18-year-old boy, I mean, you're technically a man, but
right,
still very adolescent in your thoughts and everything. As an 18-year-old, most of us had that schoolboy kind of crush, infatuation on someone at some point in our teen years, and it dictated a lot of our behavior.
Right.
And so, maybe not to the extent that it did with Harold, and obviously we weren't in this setting, but it's that part of that aspect of his character is so relatable to me that Harold had a charm to him in his own way because of that.
Okay.
And I feel like it's so innocent in the first act, and it turns into this like literally evil thing in the second act, and it's such a stark juxtaposition. Like it's just crazy how hard it flips, and he just turns into this so such a angry and just like his thoughts. Just it's the inner monologue that he displays, where he's talking. He's having a conversation with like Stu, and he's thinking, God, I wish I could just kill him right now.
Yeah.
That's just such a stark contrast from Act 1 and Book 1 Harold. It's heartbreaking. Like it's really crazy.
It is, and it also plays into this kind of sense of ownership that he has over Fran, and like it's stuff that was set up at the end of Book 1 where like Stu is telling him like, oh, you have nothing to worry about and everything, kind of placating to his kind of delusional state of mind regarding Fran, but it kind of comes out in such a dramatic and tense and tragic way in Book 2, in that he has this feeling that like, well, you know, he has the sense of ownership over her because he was with her at the start of it, and it's just a kind of grotesque attitude to have, but it is manifested in his desire to just eventually just cause harm and murder to people.
Right.
It's just
it's such an immature teenage boy notion that he has.
Yes.
And like I said, it morphs into something so dark that it's one of the more disturbing parts of the book. The path that Carol goes down.
And the slow build toward it too is just really intense and dramatic. And the thing that I kind of keep coming back to, or I was really affected by this time around, is that it's so close. Like they're so close to stopping it and stopping him. Like there's a moment where I think Larry is within a few inches away from like finding the ledger, or Fran finds the ledger but doesn't open it or something, or notices the space where the ledger is but doesn't look through it. And it's just like that could have just stopped everything. They could have stopped it. But, you know, cause a wheel. So they couldn't stop it. And poor Nick. And several others. But yeah, to kind of backtrack, how about Nick meeting Tom Cullen in the early part of Book 2? Like that's one of the first things in Book 2 is that he meets Tom Cullen and they have their little adventure.
Yes. It's such a fun pairing in this book. Like you know, there's a lot of great characters that work well together, but it's just such an interesting and unique circumstance that a deaf mute meets a mentally challenged person. Like it's just like, who thinks of that? You know, who thinks to write that up? And the thing is, it's so challenging. It's such a challenging thing to write, where it's sort of like one person communicates in this such a childish way, and it gets no reciprocity whatsoever because he can't read. And the other person communicates to the audience strictly through like inner monologue and like inner thoughts, you know, and is such this intellectually advanced person and is very smart and complex, but can only communicate those ideas to the audience, can't communicate it to the person that he's supposed to be bouncing his ideas off of. Right. It's just such a fun dynamic. It's just, again, it's a challenging thing to write, and like Stephen King could have taken an easy way out, and like him pairing, I think it'd be very interesting if he would have paired Nick with a character like Glenn Bateman. You know, he could have written a whole freaking book of just them having a conversation, right?
Absolutely.
And those two kind of going head to head in the meetings, the committee meetings, is some of the coolest part of the committee meetings, right? But I just think it's so much more fun to pair Nick Andros with Tom Cullen and have them get to Boulder together. Like it's just so cool. And you know, where it leads to in the third book is really fun, or at the end of Book 2, actually.
Right.
So.
And it's a really, like you said, it's a challenging thing to put to these two characters that communication is their biggest stumbling block together. Like it is a challenge to write that, and it's really fascinating the way that they grow, and you really feel that kind of genuine connection that they form. And then early parts of Book 2, they meet up with God, what is her name? Julie Lowry. She is super vindictive and scary, and she's like playing with them and like tempting Nick, and it's just really fun in a really cruel and disturbing way to see King play with this whole like idea of like, okay, not every person obviously that we're going to meet is good. Obviously this is a story of good versus bad, but like here we have someone who is just so emotionally stunted and so just immature that she is putting the lives of people that are in their very nature good in harm's way just for a laugh or just to satisfy her own kind of boredom and narcissism. So I really appreciated that section of the book.
Yeah, I didn't remember it very much from past readings, and I kind of forgot about that character.
Yeah,
Julie Lowry, because she shows up later, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't remember her very much, but yeah, that's a part that I also found fascinating, especially that like Nick sort of hooks up with her, and like it's funny because throughout it we're hearing his inner monologue, we're reading his inner monologue, and he's sort of justifying it in a very carnal way. Like he's sort of Nick is so much a beacon of good, and like he's very righteous and stuff like that. It's just interesting to see him make such a impulsive sort of carnal instinctive decision that like could have some pretty big ramifications. He's just like, I'm gonna nail this chick because I kind of feel like it, and it's
right.
kind of awesome. Like it's just it's sort of an interesting thing to see Nick go through.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Yeah, and we talked kind of at some point off mic, well technically on mic, but we didn't end up recording, but anyway, that's a whole other thing. The tornado scene with Tom Cullen and Nick, when they're kind of trapped by it, it kind of reinforces the idea of the Dark Man and Flag, and we get this kind of horrific big set piece where they're trapped and there's a tornado and they see visions of the Dark Man. How did you feel about that whole section of the book? It happens very early in book 2.
Yeah, and I feel like it's pretty quick too. But I think one of my favorite parts of it is the fact that Tom saves Nick. I think we see it's very easy to look at their relationship and just see how much Tom relies on Nick.
Yeah.
And he's sort of the dependent one in the relationship, but Tom ends up saving Nick's life in this, and during the tornado. And Tom has this very, again, instinctual. I don't mean to keep going back to that word, but he has this very instinctual reaction to the tornado, and he, like I said, it ends up saving Nick's life. And without Tom, Nick would be dead, or at least very badly injured. And that was such a fun, or such a good idea, I guess, creatively to lay out the importance of Tom Cullen and how he's not just this dependent character. He has a role to play, and again, that comes up later on in the book. But that was one of my favorite parts of it, is that Nick realizes how important Tom is as a result of that. Yeah,
they definitely complement each other, and like they're a really good pairing, and that speaks to King's writing, that he can put these two characters together that have such a huge stumbling block between them and have them find this camaraderie and bond that forms between them is just really, really well done in terms of King's writing. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So kind of going back a little bit and kind of backtracking a little bit, Larry meets Nadine and Joe. Now, I had forgotten about Joe as a character.
Really?
Yeah. And the way that he meets him is that Joe is almost like this feral creature that he wants to just murder Larry as soon as he meets him and everything, and Nadine kind of has to pull him back a little bit. It's a really interesting dynamic to have this kid that is just so consumed with hatred and evil in him that is really just kind of thrilling in a sense in this beginning part. And then later on when they're in Boulder and he is bonding with Larry, and after he meets with Mother Abigail and he reveals like his real name is something I can't remember, but it's like the 180 that he does is just so heartfelt, especially with Larry talking to him and bonding with him. So how'd you feel about Larry and Nadine and Joe?
Yeah, it's a little disturbing how feral is a great word to describe him. I hadn't thought of that word. Yeah, he's again just sort of he's in this like defense mode and just is a very is not an intellectual creature at all. Just very survivalish and feral. It's a disturbing aspect to assign to a child, especially I think he's supposed to be like 9 or 10 years old. You know, not very old. That's a disturbing thing, and I think it's interesting how that influences Nadine as well, because she's very much like a purpose-driven character. She's very like distracted by taking care of Joe, and I think the fact that she had that role and that responsibility really kept her on the better path that she had laid out in front of her. And I think once Joe starts to come around and lose that caveman instinct that he's operating with, I think it really gives her a sense of waywardness, and she doesn't have direction. And that's sort of it's sort of a catalyst, I think, for her confusion on where she wants to be. And again, it's tragic, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. And that kind of the way that he centers Nadine, at least for the time being, is really kind of pretty hypnotic. Like the little family that forms between the three of them is just really kind of heartwarming in a weird sense. Like when Larry gives him the guitar and he like is very instinctively like learning guitar and everything, it's a nice bonding moment. And then it kind of just changes and morphs. And by the way, his name is Leo.
Leo, that's right.
Yeah. And so, like I said, we don't get a lot of the Dark Man and the evil side of things, but we do get Trash Can Man and the Kid. Their kind of adventures and everything. This, from what I understand, is not in the original cut. It's one of the portions of the book that was cut out for reasons. Because the reason that this is the uncut and official or whatever version is that when The Stand was originally printed and originally published, it was literally too long to like the printer and the publisher could not physically create the book. So that's why King had to cut out so much stuff, and then later on he added it back in. But anyway, the stuff with Trash Can Man and the Kid, it's weirdly it's kind of disturbing to me because I mean the Kid rapes Trash Can Man, and Trash Can Man is like it's just upsetting because he is so complacent and just like fine with it and everything, and like the Kid is so erratic and crazy and everything. It's a really trippy kind of thing. Like the Kid wants to destroy Flag, and then I can't remember how the Kid dies. Do you remember?
The wolves eat him.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So how'd you feel about the Trash Can Man and the Kid?
I really like it because, I mean, what's great about it is it's a source of power and confidence for, ultimately it's a display of confidence for Trash Can Man. He's so, again, wayward is another word I come back to. He's so one track mind,
right?
And so just erratic that he just sort of goes with the flow, and that's what happens initially with the Kid, is that he's really just along for the ride, and he can't really get out of the situation, and it's pretty dire, and he's like totally at the mercy of this psychopath.
Yeah.
But I just love the way it concludes with Trash Can Man sort of overpowering him because he is so revered and so important to Randall Flagg.
Yeah.
That he has this display of power at the end where he sort of commands these wolves to rip his throat out and kill the kid. This guy that was just dominating him for a few days and several pages. That's the coolest part of it for me, and that's the purpose of it. But I just think the kid is such a cool ass character to throw into the middle of the story. He's so out of sorts and so like. All these characters are so driven by either getting to Boulder or getting to Las Vegas, and they're very good evil. But this guy is totally not at all driven by that. He's just driven by going fast and drinking beer. Like that's what drives him. He's such an anomaly in the story, and to put him with a character again like Trash Can Man is such a crazy pairing.
Yeah.
That juxtaposition is just fun to watch, and it's weird. I think the first time I read this book, 24 was at its peak, at its height. The show 24.
Okay,
and so I was really into Kiefer Sutherland, and I was like, this is when like Netflix getting DVDs in the mail was still big. Like that was I'm kind of dating myself there, but I was sort of. When that was a thing, I would kind of make my way through certain catalog, like actors' catalogs.
Sure. And
because I was such a big fan of Kiefer Sutherland, I was watching his old stuff.
Okay.
And so I kept picturing the kid as Kiefer Sutherland from like Lost Boys. Kiefer Sutherland, like with a mullet, pompadour, like spiky blonde hair kind of thing. That's who I picture as the kid. I don't know why. That's. Just where my head was at the time, and so that's the only person I can picture playing the kid is like 1985 Kiefer Sutherland, which makes no sense whatsoever. It's goofy.
That does. I just googled the pictures and everything because I haven't seen Lost Boys in a very, very long time. I could totally see that. I kind of pictured a kind of a 50s greaser kind of guy.
Totally.
Kind of like. The guy Gil Bellows' character in The Shawshank Redemption, I kind of pictured like his look, but more like gruff and evil, like the kid that Andy Dufresne tutors.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, that's really interesting. Nice. I was thinking you were going to say I was thinking you were going to say Kiefer as Ace Merrill.
That's funny. I was just about to say, both of those actors, you thought of another Stephen King property, and I thought of an actor who was sort of got one of his big breaks in a Stephen King adaptation.
Yeah.
Stand By Me. So
yeah. That's kind of an anomaly of the book, of this section of the book, because we don't really get much else from the Dark Man and from Flagg's camp. It kind of ends with. Trash Can arriving in Vegas, and we get insight into Flagg ordering people to be crucified in Vegas, which that imagery is just intense. It's just crazy to me. Like there's a little bit of Flagg in the section of the book, but it goes a long way. Like, did that stick out to you at all?
Definitely. Super disturbing, and I think one of the coolest parts about it is how nobody in the dark zone, in Las Vegas is like, no one's like enthusiastic about it. No one's like, oh yeah, this is, it's just kind of how it goes. These people deserve to be crucified. Like everyone is so disturbed by it and participating in it so reluctantly. Yeah. It's just very evil. Like it just totally, that's one of the coolest things about it is how everyone is looking because they're being forced to look and forced to participate in it. And the only one who's having a good time is Randall Flagg. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So on the other side of things, we get Mother Abigail. We get her backstory, and we get her kind of conveniently leaving the scene for a very long passage of time.
Yeah.
How'd you feel about Mother Abigail's arc, her introduction, and her backstory and everything?
I kind of forgot how much of her backstory was really laid out in the book. How she was, her family was, her father and her family is kind of a figurehead in the part of Kansas, Oklahoma,
Kansas, yeah,
Kansas, same thing.
Sure.
How, despite the fact that she came of age and has lived through the 20th century, which was not historically kind to black people.
Right.
Despite that, she managed to be a important person in her community and is revered in her community. And she was able to be a pretty normal person, despite all those aspects of being a black person in the 20th century in the South, especially.
Right.
So I enjoyed all that, and that was all. I kind of forgot about that part about her character. But I think there was a podcast, I don't even know if it's still around, called Books and Nachos.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, yeah.
Yeah, and I can't even remember what the guy's name is who does that podcast, but he reviewed The Stand. And he had a really good point where, I don't know if it was like when this book was written, or it's just like he talked about how sometimes writers will create this magical black person character.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that, but go ahead.
Yeah, and it's kind of, it's a bit of a crutch, and it's sort of problematic, and it's sort of like a response, like a white guilt response to racism. And it sort of seems like it's not, I don't really know how to wrap my head around it or how to articulate it, but it's almost like it's almost like it's a crutch, or it's sort of lazy to like be like, well, I'm not racist because look at how important this black character is to the, this character is the true north of goodness in my story, and it's a black person. So like, not only am I not racist, but one of the most important characters in my story is a black person, and they have these magic powers, and they save the white people and stuff like that. And it's like, he does a much better job of explaining it.
My best character is black.
Oh, that's awesome. My best character is black. That's great. But that's, you kind of exemplified it there. Yeah, it's sort of like that haughty thing that white people will do sometimes by saying, I'm not racist, my best character is black. Yeah.
Right.
That's how it kind of comes off. And like, she's definitely a good character, but it's just like, I don't know. I think it's just a bit off-putting or a bit problematic that her character has that aspect to her.
And honestly, like King has honestly, he's caught a lot of flack for that, because I mean, it's not just Mother Abigail. I mean, you've got Dick Halloran, you've got John Coffey, and a bunch of people of color that I'm blanking on now, but he has caught a lot of flack for that. And like, I remember there was some. It was when King tweeted about the awards, and how he said that he bases his awards choices on merit only, and like race and everything doesn't play a factor in it. It just should be on merit and everything. And he caught a lot of flack for that, because there's a lot of instances of minority voices being silenced and people of color not getting their projects funded or anything like that. So we covered that in a previous episode, but one of the responses I saw was that they called out the fact that he has a lot of the quote unquote magical black characters. And I mean, it's hard to defend it, or it's hard to argue against it. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I'm the right person to kind of comment on it or anything, but
right.
I could see it being, obviously problematic and everything.
Definitely. I feel like it's like he's trying to apologize for throwing around the N-word a lot because he has racist characters in his stories.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what it is, but that's sort of what it feels like.
That's an interesting perspective. I had never considered that. Huh.
And it's funny because when you think about another storyteller like Quentin Tarantino, who uses the N-word a lot in his movies, and has a lot of racist characters in his movies, but I'm sure he's probably been accused of being racist before, but it's not something that it's not something he's had to address a lot.
Right.
And it's just he just has racist characters in his stories because there's racist people in the world.
Right.
And it happens a lot, and he doesn't apologize for it. He doesn't try to make up for it. It's just there because that's kind of how racism is. And I can't say that that's kind of what Stephen King's doing. I'm not saying he's apologizing for that, or it's a way to counteract that or counterbalance it. It's just, that's just kind of what comes to mind is the way Quentin Tarantino addresses racism in his stories. It's very much on its face. And I'm not saying one's better than the other either. I'm not, again, I'm not articulating it really well. It's just, it's just kind of, and I don't even have a big problem with John Coffey or Mother Abigail. I don't think they're bad characters by any stretch, and it's not shitty writing. You can't say that at all. I just don't, but it's just kind of it's something that kind of jumps out, I guess. Yeah.
And King hasn't really done quite well in terms of just writing just African-American characters either. In the Bill Hodges trilogy, it always struck me as just kind of really awkward and uncomfortable whenever, Jerome. Yeah. Whenever Jerome would break into his Tyrone Feelgood character that is really playing up this this slave owner relationship kind of thing because he does chores for Bill Hodges. It really made me uncomfortable.
Man, see, I thought that was hilarious.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that got me every time.
I mean, yeah, it just makes me kind of feel a little awkward for King that he's putting that in there. And I don't think that King is a racist person or anything, obviously. I think he's a very progressive minded person and his politics line up pretty well with mine. But it is I think he has that kind of stumbling block in his writing in terms of that. Even in the Dark Tower series, I think when he writes for Detta and Odetta in the Drawing of the Three, I think it's just really, granted, it's kind of a unique situation. There's a split personality thing, and it's crazy in and of itself, but it feels like it's just a borderline caricature, and it just feels really awkward to me. So, yeah,
totally.
Yeah, but maybe we can revisit that at some point as a topic for an episode.
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I do remember I did listen to Books and Nachos a while back, and they do still have episodes coming out. So cool.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't stick with it. I think I just listened to his Stephen King episodes.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I did too. He, I don't remember his name, but he also does Now Playing podcast, which I know Mike is a huge fan of.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, so Mother Abigail, she kind of goes away because she feels like she is, she has sinned, or she needs to atone for her behavior and stuff. So she goes on a pilgrimage into the wilderness. And I felt like that was a little too convenient. It was just a way to kind of get her out of the picture. How did you feel about her kind of absence throughout most of the second half of this portion of the book?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the motivation was there, frankly, for that character, or for King to put that into the book. I always thought it was kind of weird, and I don't know. I feel like he sort of didn't know what to do with her once, because she, the onus of her character was to draw everyone to Boulder. They saw her in their dreams, and she's this central figure. She's a symbol, and frankly, that symbol had served its purpose in a way, and she was pretty much she had almost become just like a mascot, and I think she had this kind of like false idol idea about her, and that's what made her feel guilty, and I understand that, and I understand why she felt that way, and I don't even disagree with it. But yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to read book 3 again, and because I don't remember exactly what happens to her character, but yeah, I don't have a big problem with it, but it did seem like sort of a distraction, like how they're all out searching for her and stuff. And
yeah. To your point, she dies at the end of this section of the book.
Did she die? That's right. I can't remember.
Which we'll get to that in a bit. But I want to say, I'm trying to do some quick Googling, but in On Writing... Oh, crap. Hang on. Okay. In On Writing, King mentions that... he had really hard time with this writing, with this book. Essentially, he had a really big bout of writer's block, and I want to say that this was the section where he really came, where he almost abandoned the project. I can't say for certain, but I do know that the anecdote is that he had some extreme writer's block for The Stand, and he kind of put it away, and then he went kind of on a walk or something, and then kind of just suddenly had an epiphany, like, okay, all of these characters are doomed. I need to kill a bunch of them and send them out to Vegas or something. And I want to say that part of that might be like a byproduct of that writer's block is that he didn't know what to do with Mother Abigail. I do like the idea of her being, like you said, a beacon for the good and to bring them together. And I like, in theory, the idea of this person, this somewhat magical person, brings all of these people together, and then they are now looking at her for guidance, and then she just up and leaves. And so they're kind of lost. They have to figure out for themselves. I really like that dynamic. I just kind of wish that it was kind of handled a little bit cleaner, I guess, in the book. Did you feel any of that, or how did you? Yeah. Not
necessarily. I didn't feel a ton of that because I feel like the committee, the Free Zone committee, was filling a leadership role, and I didn't feel like a leadership or a drive vacuum, if you will. And I feel like the conflict, which the committee brings it up, that they're kind of focused on, well, let's get the power turned back on, and let's get some law and order, and let's get this going and that going, and this committee and this subcommittee and all that. When really the biggest conflict of the book is that Randall Flagg is out to get all of them.
Yeah,
and it's sort of in the background. And I think the passing of Mother Abigail kind of brings that back home and sort of refocuses them, and kind of lights a fire under them,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I do like the confluence of events where she returns just as the bomb is about to explode and the chaos is about to reign and everything. But we'll get to that in a second. I do have a couple of other points I want to kind of hit before we get to the big part of it. The Boulder Free Zone. First, I'll actually backtrack a little bit more. One of the things that I really liked, and we talked about it in about book 1, but what I really like about the book as a whole is Larry's kind of mental image of Harold, and how that mental image is just shattered when he meets him in Boulder. I love that dynamic, and how like Franny is kind of confused by Larry, who is kind of maybe not idolizing Harold per se, but he has Harold up on this pedestal, and like just the wind getting knocked out of his sails when he meets Harold and realizes like this isn't the guy I thought he was. I just think that's another example of the characters kind of coming together and meeting in unique ways and everything. So how'd you feel about their kind of meeting?
Yeah, it it was really fun, and like it was sort of nice to remember Harold in Act 1, because we're following him down such a dark path, and like I said, it's so tragic to see him go the way he does that it's nice to have Larry with that image in his head, and it is comical to see when he finally meets him and it's all shattered, like you said. It's definitely fun, and but again, it sort of adds to the tragedy, I think.
Mm-hmm. And it also kind of is indicative of Harold's hubris a little bit. Like, it's this persona that he's putting out into the world where he is not necessarily indicative of that persona. Like, he's kind of an ass.
Right.
And it's just really interesting to see that dynamic at play.
And it would have been so fun. It would have been even more fun to have Act 1 Harold meet Larry. Like if Harold was like, by the time they meet, if Harold would have still been the same old Harold, to have them meet would have been even more entertaining, because Larry would have had him built up so much in his head, and then like Harold is totally putting on a show, a bit of a nice guy show with Larry. But if it would have been Act 1 Harold, he would have been like, well, yeah, you're an idiot and I'm a genius. So
right.
Of course, and like he would have just been this condescending little shit, and like it would have just pissed Larry off instantly.
Right.
It would have been funny as hell. Like it would have been, Harold, that goofy bastard, and like Larry, you had no idea what you were in for. It would have been the fucking comedy, basically.
Oh yeah.
But it's just tragic because of what Harold's become.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that Harold, it was always in Harold in book 1, but not, like, it was still up in the air. Like, he had a choice. Like, he could be good or evil. He could kind of walk the path of the righteous man, to bring it back to Tarantino. But no, he could have been a pillar of the community and everything, but the tragedy of Harold is that he is just consumed by himself and his narcissism.
Yeah.
And jealousy, really.
Right.
So to kind of move along, the committee makes the choice to enlist spies to send out to Flag's camp. Now, they decide to send Judge Ferris, who... Judge Ferris is a pretty cool character. I feel like he's a little underwritten or a little underdeveloped, because throughout this section of the book, I just kept getting him confused with Glenn Bateman. He kind of felt like it felt like Glenn Bateman and Stu Redman were the same as Judge Ferris and Larry. Like, it just felt like it was very weird, like, kind of connection there.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. So
yeah, and I mean, there's so many damn characters, and it's such a long book. It's hard to really round out everybody.
Yep.
But I would have loved to have had more Judge Ferris.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so Judge Ferris, Dana Jurgens, and Tom Cullen are the 3 spies that are selected, and they use hypnosis on Tom Cullen. How did you feel about this element of the story, like using hypnosis to kind of get him to snap out of it and come back and everything, and just... Yeah, how did you feel about that? The magic of it.
I think it's really effective, but it's also kind of convenient. Just them choosing Tom for that role and having him do that is compelling because of his mental handicap. But I feel like the hypnotism is just it's a bit convenient and makes it a little more, it adds to the plausibility of it, and it makes it a little less compelling. But the hypnotism scene in and of itself is just cool as hell. Like, I just love the way it goes, and how the one character, God, I can't remember his name, like Nick's translator, basically. The older kind of hillbilly guy. Ralph Brentner? Ralph Brentner, yes. How he's like so disturbed by it that he can't even be present for it.
Yeah.
Like I really enjoy his reaction to it. Like I think that's, as a reader, his reaction is sort of how I feel. Like this is like it's a good idea to send Tom, and because he's subjected or because he's sensitive to hypnosis, it makes him a good candidate. But it's also such a morally, on its face, it's almost morally wrong to do, and he just can't live with that and can't get his head around it. And like that's sort of how I felt as a reader.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, and I can definitely respect that. I didn't really have a problem with it. I did kind of enjoy the kind of added mysticism of to the story in this part, because for the most part, a lot of this has been pretty straightforward and everything, aside from the dreams and Mother Abigail and Flag's sorcery and everything. But within the Boulder Free Zone and the committee and everything, I did like that they had this kind of hypnosis thing, and that they also had like Leo can read minds and everything. It's just like little bits and pieces here that are kind of showing that the world isn't exactly as it seems in this world that is created by King.
Right. And in this world of some magic and fantasy that he's building, hypnosis is kind of fun because it's sort of magical in its nature, but it's also like in the real world and in real life, there's some. It's almost like a pseudoscience. Like there's psychological science to back up that hypnosis can be an effective thing. Like it's not everyone is susceptible to it, and it's kind of a hit or miss thing. It's not a concrete method of psychology or anything like that, but it's a proven thing that can actually have, you know, it can have an effect on people. It can actually be an effective tool in the psychology world to use. You know, it's just kind of fun that there's these little grains of truth to hypnotism that it's fun because it's like I said, it's kind of a pseudoscience and it's kind of a real thing, but it's also sort of mystic and sort of what's the word I'm thinking of? Sort of supernatural-ish, kind of like it's got a bit of a stigma to it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That I think makes it a cool storytelling tactic.
Sure.
So I do appreciate that about it.
Okay. Yeah. To kind of move along, do you want to kind of start wrapping up and get to the end of the?
Yes, we probably should.
Okay, cool. So, there's some Nadine and Harold stuff. Basically, Nadine gets word from Flag that they know and everything, and that the committee knows what she's up to and everything. So, and what Harold's up to. So they need to kind of get the fuck out of there. So we get to kind of the end of the book, this section of the book, and kind of all hell breaks loose. So Harold creates a bomb in a shoebox, and he sets it up in the meeting at the house where Nick Andros is, and with a bunch of other people. And this is one of the more intense moments of the book and of Stephen King's career that I've read, honestly, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The bomb goes off, and sadly it kills Nick Andros, one of my favorite characters, although he's not as prevalent as I remember him being. I think it just stands out because of this ending to his character. But what I love about it, the beauty and the poetry of it, like first of all, the chaos of the group coming back to the house saying that Mother Abigail has been found and she's back and everything, complimenting the hectic nature of the bomb about to go off and the bomb going off. But what I love about it, the poetry of that moment, is that Nick finds the bomb just as Harold hits the walkie-talkie and says, "My name is Harold Emery Lauder. I am doing this of my own free will." And I think it's brilliant that his message, like his big, like message of terror and like the big moment of his life that's been leading to this, literally falls on deaf ears. Like, I think that is just glorious.
Yes.
Yeah. How did you feel about this whole section of the big climax of this section of the book?
It's very, it is super intense. It's very like thriller-ish. I kind of, I enjoy that Franny kind of has a bit of a premonition about it and gets like a bad feeling.
Yeah.
Like it's not like the shine or anything like that or the touch, but she just has sort of one of those weird, inexplicable supernatural premonitions that are, people get feelings like that. It's something you can't explain. And that's kind of what's happening to her. I sort of appreciate that aspect of it. It makes it more intense and more thrilling.
Yeah.
So I do like that part of it, but yeah, it is super sad that Nick has to be one of the ones that goes, but I think it's also his death coupled with Mother Abigail kind of solidifies the drive or it drives home the seriousness of the situation. Because like I said, they were all a bit complacent, and sort of keeping Randall Flagg and the happenings of evil kind of in the background and sort of not focusing on that properly. And the death of Mother Abigail and Nick is sort of a symptom of that. And it's kind of it's sort of their penance for that sin, if you will.
Yeah. They got too complacent.
Yeah. The complacency is the major theme of it, I think. But it's sad, but it's such a good way to wrap up, to be the crescendo of book 2. It's so thrilling, and it's kind of my favorite ending of the book, if that makes sense, because there's sort of three conclusive parts of the book with the Stand being broken up into 3 different books.
Right.
Of those 3 endings, this is kind of my favorite one. So
I agree. And we'll talk in the next episode, but what I'm wondering going into book 3 of The Stand is, the few times that I've read this before, I kind of wondered, does the book recover from that? Does the book utilize that thrill and that big turning point in the narrative and create in it a satisfying third act? I genuinely don't remember. I remember several parts of it, but I don't remember how I felt as a whole, and I'm curious how it's going to resonate with me now that we're reading it now and kind of dissecting it the way we are. Yeah,
me too. I agree. Yeah.
And we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the denouement of book 2. So we've got Mother Abigail on her deathbed, and she is saying to the group, first of all, Glenn speaks out about Flagg in the meeting openly. Everything, it's okay, we're done pretending that this evil doesn't exist. He's attacked us. We need to go find him. This is what we're here for and everything. And so we're getting it set up that we're setting up the titular stand. Mother Abigail is sending 4 men west, and I love this. I love the implication of this. It is this biblical kind of pilgrimage that she's putting Larry, Ralph, Stu, and Glenn on, and by that they have to take it on faith. They have to go on. They have to go on this pilgrimage with no food or water. They have to travel on foot. It's just a very biblical kind of thing. It's the 4 princes that they're sending west is just really satisfying and enthralling to me. How'd you feel about the setup of The Stand and us seeing off the princes at the end of the book?
Well, it's such a stark part of the story because everyone was kind of riding high. They had reestablished society and things were better and people were starting to find happiness again. And then this tragic thing happens. And in addition to that, some of their most respected leaders have to leave, on an act of faith, like you said. And it's dark. It's sad, and it's things were going so good, and now there's all this stuff is up in the air right now, and it's just dark. That's the best way to put it. But sometimes the dark stuff is the best, and that's
totally
it ends up being the most compelling parts of the story. And the sadness of Fran, especially at Stu having to leave, is really hard. One of the hardest parts of that denouement.
Yeah, their kind of farewell is really heartfelt and everything. How did you feel? We didn't really talk about Franny and Stu's relationship. How did you feel kind of in overall terms about their relationship and their growth as a couple?
I feel like they kind of, because at the end of book one, Stu kind of mentions through, and we, as the reader, we experience it through his inner monologue or his thought that he realizes he's attracted to her and that he wants her. And so we kind of figure they're going to get together, and it happens very quickly in book two. And, it's so pivotal for all this tragedy that they get together, but it's kind of it's interesting how quickly they fall in love and how quickly they turn into this kind of like married couple.
Yeah, the kind of domesticity. I don't know if that's a word. I really don't know if that's a word. The domestic nature of their relationship. It just feels very kind of a little pat, really. Like it feels like I think it's not a problem, really. It's just ineffectual to me because a lot of it is coming through the perspective of Franny's journal or her diary that we're reading passages from throughout it. And that kind of sets it into kind of a adolescent kind of romance kind of thing. And when it grows into like a real, like full-fledged romance and everything and marriage, it's like, okay, fine. Yeah, sure. We kind of got bigger things going on. Dude's making a bomb. So kind of
right.
Like,
it gets so real so fast, and they like I said, they fall into a pattern so quickly. It's kind of, it's like there's no like honeymoon phase. It's just very, they fall right into it, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that on its face. It's sort of a circumstance of, it's a symptom of the circumstances they're in, right? You kind of have to act fast, and
and it's sweet in and of itself, but it's also just like the threat of it or the drama of it is contingent on Harold, and like that dynamic is more kind of secluded and clandestine and everything. Like it's not something that is at the forefront. Like they're not having big arguments or whatever with Harold, or they're not really that conflicted about it. It's just like you said, they're just kind of already in a rhythm, and it's just kind of like, all right, this is how it goes. This is life in Boulder.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. So we send off the 4 pilgrims for the quest to take a stand. And I do really, really love, I don't remember who exactly said it. I think it was Larry, but don't quote me on that. But the last line of this section of the book is, I think it's Larry, says, or it might be Glenn, but he says, I feel like this is the end of everything. And I love that that's the what we end on in this book, in The Stand.
Wow. Yeah, it's very poignant.
Very cool. Very poignant. I love it. So yeah, are we talked out of book 2?
Yeah, I think we broke it down pretty good.
Sweet. Yeah, I think so too. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let us know what you thought of book 2 of The Stand. Next time on the podcast, we're going to talk about book 3, the conclusion of The Stand. Book 3, The Stand. I already closed my notes. I'm so sorry. Yeah, where is it? Okay, book 3, The Stand. September 7th to January 10th. And I think, Tiny, I won't say it on air. We'll talk after recording. But yeah, we'll have that next time. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Long days and pleasant nights.
Oh, shit. Nice.
We're rusty, man.
I know. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.
Jesus Christ. I think the problem is that I just recorded an episode of Anthology before this, so...
Oh, yeah. Sure, you're in that mode still.
Yes, that's why I was rambling. And now, here's a short clip from our Patreon-exclusive RSS feed. To hear the full clip and more exclusive Patreon content, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and become a patron at the minimum rate of $1 per month. Thank you and enjoy.
Oh no!
Yeah, I don't know. There's no problem.
Okay. Well, I know that you and Kirsten on, I think, Obsessive Viewer you talked about Middleditch and Schwartz.
Yeah. Did you watch it? Did you watch it?
I did. Paige and I watched all of it.
Nice. Okay, first of all, I keep saying in my head, fraternities, and also in a really fucked up way, I keep saying the more power for the executive branch. The president can do no wrong. The president can do no wrong. So how did you like it? How'd you like it?
Oh, we thought it was great. I haven't listened to your guys' review yet. I haven't gotten there, but yeah, we loved it. We actually watched a lot of it.
Tower Junkies is edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. For a full archive of our episodes, go to towerjunkiespod.com/archive. You can also like our Facebook page at facebook.com/towerjunkiespod and follow us on Twitter at towerjunkiespod. If you enjoy the show, please take a couple minutes to leave us a rating and a quick review on Apple Podcasts. This is the easiest way to support what we do, and all it costs is just a little bit of your time. If you'd like to donate to the podcast, you can make a PayPal donation at towerjunkiespod.com/donate or support us on Patreon for recurring donations and access to commentary tracks and B-roll audio recorded exclusively for patrons at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Every donation goes toward paying the fees to keep the podcast running and is greatly appreciated. For official Obsessive Viewer merch, including shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more, visit our TeePublic store. You can find a link to the store in the show notes of this episode and at obsessiveviewer.com/donate. Or you can simply search for Obsessive Viewer at teepublic.com. For information about our annual live event showcasing short horror films from local filmmakers, check out shocktoberinirvington.com. And for an archive of all our events, as well as news about potential future events, head over to obsessiveviewer.com/live. For more podcast content, you can find our flagship movie and TV review and discussion show, The Obsessive Viewer Podcast, at obsessiveviewer.com and on Twitter at obsessiveviewer. You can also find Anthology, Matt's solo podcast covering The Twilight Zone, and other classic and contemporary science fiction anthology TV shows at anthologypod.com and OV Anthology Pod on Twitter. And finally, check out The Secular Perspective, Tiny's side project podcast, which tackles current events and life's big questions from the perspective of secular hosts Chad and Amanda at thesecularperspective.com. Music for the podcast is provided with permission from Fingers T on YouTube. Additional bumper music is provided courtesy of As Good As It Gets, which can be found at facebook.com/asgoodasitgetsband. Thank you so much for listening. Long days and pleasant nights.
Kitty!